right, so in doing so, let's start then with the first premise here, and just to keep ourselves on track regarding point one. All right, so one way then to focus here is to then block all of the rest of the argument and just focus on this first proposition here, that the universe is complexly ordered, and just ask ourselves, is that true? Is that false? Is it questionable? Are there any complicating issues that we should consider here? And then make a judgment call about its overall sense. Now, I'll make the assertion here at this point that this is not especially controversial. There are certainly some questions that we can ask. If I consider my brother's apartment before he got married, right? And I would walk in there and I would say, wow, this is not a place that is complexly ordered. This seems to be rather chaotic here. Or we might consider hurricanes, right? Hurricanes come through the Gulf of Mexico and devastate New Orleans. And we go down to New Orleans and we say, wow, this is not orderly, let alone complexly ordered. This is absolute randomness, mess, and chaos. Would examples like that count as counterexamples to the claim that the universe is complexly ordered? Well, I don't think so. My brother's apartment may have been messy on occasion and not ordered the way I would have liked it to have seen it ordered, or maybe he would have wanted it to be ordered if he'd had more time or a maid. But nonetheless, there's a cause and effect reason for why everything is the way it is in that particular apartment. Or we might say that hurricanes cause the universe not to be ordered, or parts of the universe not to be ordered the way we want them to be ordered. But nonetheless, there is all kinds of cause and effect going on in the case of a hurricane, and everything that ends up messy that it is in New Orleans after the hurricane. Nonetheless, there's a perfectly good causal explanation for why every piece of driftwood or destructed property ended up the way that it was. Other people might raise questions about whether there are pockets of indeterminacy or randomness or chaos at various quantum levels of the universe, and we could certainly have those debates right on another time. Or we might make the claim that we haven't really checked out all of the universe, and so we don't know if complex order is all the way run through the universe. It might be only in the parts of the universe that we are aware of so far. And again, those can be some interesting questions to raise, but I'm not going to address them in this context here. And it's not necessary, because whether we sign on to one side or the other on those issues, it nonetheless is the case that there is lots of complex order in the universe, and that complex order requires explanation. And that's exactly what this argument is trying to do. So we can then say, to whatever extent we think that there is complexity and order in the universe, where does that complex order come from, and is this argument the right kind of approach to giving an explanation for that complex order? So I'm going to set aside question number one as not being particularly controversial for those reasons. All right, so that said, we can accept premise number one for sake of argument at the very least. Let's do the same thing then for step number two regarding number two. Ask ourselves the same question. Complex order requires an orderer. Is that true? Is that false? Is that controversial? Is that questionable? And here I'll make the initial claim that this is the most controversial step in the argument. It's the most interesting step in the argument, and the one that requires the most close attention. Now, clearly what's built into this premise here, the idea that complex order requires an orderer, is what we're assuming to be a top-down, and this is the criticism that is most commonly made by those who are critical of this argument. The idea that the order that comes into existence requires a certain kind of causal process. Right? That is to say, we have some stuff that is lying, say, on a sculptor's bench, and we think of the ordering of that stuff as being imposed on it by some sort of intelligent and powerful being, as we go on to do here. And that makes sense from our human experience, because we do know that that kind of causal process exists. We know what it is like to be a sculptor. or we know what it is like to be someone working in his or her workshop designing something on a workbench. And so it certainly is true that some kinds of complex order do require an orderer to come into existence. But this is making a more general claim that all complex order, or any sort of complex order, necessarily requires a causal process such as that to come into existence. And what the other side of the debate wants to argue is that it's not top-down ordering that is the only possibility, but that there can be lots of complex order that emerges through bottom-up processes. And so the question then would be, why not certain sorts of bottom-up processes?